And just because it allows it to come up does not mean it's going to be unicorns and rainbows and singing kumbaya when it gets processed. There could be a whole lot of tears, a whole lot of frustration, but that's what has to be released and experienced to get to the other side of it. I remember when I was teaching, students would constantly, and this would be like, basic level, introductory, foundational teaching, would get so freaked out if a client started to cry. Oh, they need therapy. No, they don't. They need someone to hold the space for them. Because if you are going to relegate emotions to the fields of therapy, that means every family member and every best friend ever in the history of the world is guilty of practicing without a license. Get over yourself. Hold the space for them and be another human being, being there for them in their time of need. Hold the silence, don't say a damn word, and hold it with empathy. And you'll find they will find their way through it.
Welcome to the coaching studio. I'm Lyssa deHart, your host, and today I have the pleasure of introducing you to Daniel Olexa, MCC. Daniel is a masterful coach, author, hypnotherapist, and someone who has spent a lifetime exploring the depths of both the mind and the ocean, literally. As a IDC staff instructor with Patty, he loves scuba diving, but he's also no stranger to soaring heights, jumping out of a perfectly good airplane at 12,000 feet for his 57th birthday, something that I have shared with him. Actually, not with him, but I too have done this. Daniel is anything but ordinary. From his time as a diesel mechanic in the U.S. Coast Guard Reserve to his deep curiosity about how systems work, he has always had a knack for seeing the bigger picture. Even as a child, he experienced the world in a unique way, hearing voices calling his name when no one was there. Perhaps it's this deep connection to intuition and unseen patterns that makes him such a powerful coach today. As the founder of Transcendent Living, Daniel helps leaders reconnect with their own intuition, communicate with purpose, and build trust in themselves and others. He has trained over 3,500 coaches worldwide, mentored more than 100 to achieve their credentials, and co-authored several best-selling books, including Practical Manifesting and A Pessimist's Guide to Manifesting. And if you ever visit his office, you'll find another one of his passions on display, original comic book art, a testament to his love of storytelling and creativity. Today, we're diving into Daniel's unique approach to transformational coaching, his belief in the power of trust, and how he helps clients break through limiting beliefs. This is going to be an insightful and fun conversation, so let's jump into it. Daniel, thank you so much for being on the coaching studio today.
I am excited for this, Lyssa. Let's get into it.
Let's get into it. So, first, just real quick. So, for your 57th birthday, you decided to take a literal leap of faith. What spurred that for you?
I had wanted to do it for my 30th because I figured that was a really good milestone marker. There's birthdays that end in 0. And at the time, I had gone back to college to get my bachelor's degree and was living the life of a poor student at 30 and put it off. And when my wife and I moved a couple years ago, there's a small airstrip right outside of our town. This is the year. And it was a transformational experience because I have had a fear of heights. And when that door opened at 12,000 feet, and I'll keep it safe for work, stuff got real. Mm-hmm. When we launched and the instructor pushed, not only did we just start the free fall, he did a tuck and roll. So rather than seeing the planet fly toward me, I was watching the airplane fly away, which was freaky. And as soon as there was nothing under my feet, I'm screaming. I was screaming my head off in absolute terror. And we got turned around. We're falling toward the earth. I'm still screaming. And I literally heard a voice in my head said, well, either that parachute's going to open and you have nothing to worry about, or it's not, and you have nothing to worry about. Enjoy the ride.
Yeah.
Oh, I started laughing like a maniac.
Fun. This is ironic. So when I turned 30, I had just finished graduate school, and I said, it wasn't that I felt like I wasn't brave, but it was that I felt like if I could jump out of a perfectly good airplane, and that was the language I used too, I can do anything. And so I remember that moment where my feet were dangling out of the airplane, and then we rolled out of the airplane. And I think the thing that was most surprising to me, and I don't know if you experienced this, but in my mind going up to this experience, I was thinking it was going to feel like falling. So I was kind of preparing myself for this experience of falling. But what my experience was flying.
Yeah, the feel of the wind on your face from that height when you hit terminal velocity, which is like 120 miles an hour, does not feel like tripping or sliding off the side of a hill. It is an entirely different experience.
Yeah, or even just falling off a house or a barn. Like, not that I've done those things, but I mean, I've seen things go by as I've fallen. And because you don't have any of those indicators of things going by your eyes peripherally as you're free falling, it honestly was flight. I felt like it was magical. And to your point, completely transformational for me in that moment. So I normally start with really, what has this journey been like that has brought you here? And I love on your website, this picture of yourself as this sweet 5-year-old who's full of wonder and the little giggle that looks like is right there on the edge. What has led you from that moment to this one?
I think it was a lot of going out and living. In that process, forgetting who I really was, because I went out to do the things that people tell you to do instead of living the joy in life. And when I was like 3 or 4 years old, I had a love of the TV series Sea Hunt, and I wanted to be a scuba diver, to the point where I had my mom take a Quaker oatmeal box and make a scuba tank out of it. Had little straps on it, a little hose, little string that came up, and I would jump off the sofa and swim around on the floor. I had forgotten all of that until I was about 33, and I initially got certified for diving. And in a very similar journey to coaching, I got certified as a coach, and then found my love of instructing, because I want to spread this joy of the thing that I've discovered. Went from scuba diver to scuba diver instructor, and then to an instructor of instructors as an IDC staff instructor, taking part in those skills. And as I think back to that me being very joyful before I learned to be miserable, I wanted to spread that light and share that light. And that was really me. And I read it. And even through the middle part of the journey, when I was really living by other people's rules, there were bits of that would come through, because it was always about empowering other people on my team. When I was working in the printing field, and we had to come together to figure out what to put together, how to design something for a client. Here's the thing, when it was all done and everybody was happy, it's like they were important in this too. I couldn't have gotten there without them.
Yeah. Yeah. It does strike me too, as you're talking about this element of this love of sharing the passion, and also of the creating the community of that around you as well. You mentioned somewhere in your journey that when I was researching you, that you mentioned living a normal, comfortable, boring life. And you've mentioned also this idea of like forgetting those parts of yourself that you had access to when you were 5. I don't think this is a unique experience among adults. And what has allowed you to sort of undo the constructs of whatever cultural norms or whatever it is that is sort of created the construct around how you were supposed to be, the things you were supposed to do, and begin that process of shedding some of that?
As I think about it, the real me's always been in here. And this is what I talk to clients about as well, that we go out and it's the classic conversation of the true self versus the learned self. Went out, started doing the things I was told to do or I was supposed to do. There's no money in that thing you want to do. Go do this instead, because it's all about money. And I think and I'm going to throw this as a broad brushstroke, that it's somewhat true for everyone. That inner desire of the true self coming out is constantly nudging us. Do we slow down and pay attention to it when we're living that life where we're not happy and feel like we're just going through, we're sitting in comfort, but it's not really that comfortable. We're kind of sort of miserable at the same time. Do we listen to that, or do we hear the voices of everybody who's miserable around us that just says life sucks and then you die, get over it, rub some dirt on it, go get back in the game?
Yeah.
And thankfully, I listen to the other one to say, you gotta get out of this, because if you don't, you'll live the life your parents lived. And actually, that's what you're living. That was what I was living at that moment before. It was like these things have to change right now.
Yeah, it's interesting as you say that. I think about I've been really thinking a lot about these sort of societal norms and constructs that cultures create. And there's nothing wrong with like cultural rituals and things that people really support them to be connected and to have deeper meaning. But yet there's so much that gets just shut away, to your point, of that authentic self. And I was kind of laughing as I was thinking about it the other day, because there's all these ideas around around these ideas of like my authentic self and who am I authentically, so that I can market myself. And yet, if you don't do the work of starting to unpack these constructs that you have bought into, not purchased, but been given and then slapped liberally all over yourself about how you're supposed to be, and then really codified those ideas of yourself, it's going to be kind of difficult to find that authentic self. What do you think it takes to begin the process then of exploring these things?
So it's funny. Two things come up for me first. And that one of, we live in this cultural soup, no matter what culture we're in around the world, that the sons of Don Miguel Ruiz talk about in their books, and they define it as domestication.
Yeah.
We live in it. We don't question it because it's just there as an experience, and we take it to be true. And until we start to feel maybe the friction of living within that system, we just go along with it. And then the other thing in this, there's a cultural thing, as you were sharing about the idea of the authentic self. In the past 5 to 8 years, my feeling is there is something that has come up as a cultural definition of that, I'm going to be my authentic truth, my authentic self. And what that comes out as is I'm giving myself permission to be an asshole. Rather than really being self, I'm going to push back against absolutely everything that's the norm. And I bet that's not your authentic self. I bet that's the pendulum swinging the other way so you can find true center.
Yeah. And I think, 100% agree. Total agreement on that. And I think there really is that place of, I don't know, I've met quite a few children in my life, as we probably all have, and been around babies and 1-year-old, 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds. And there's something in those magical first 7 years that sometimes it's different if somebody has been in a really harsh or rigid family, but there's still the whimsy and magic in many children in those first 7 or so years. If they're lucky, 7, and maybe they can push it farther depending on their family structure. But I haven't really very often, maybe 0.0005% of the kids that I've met are worried about power, control, They're really just wanting to connect and have fun and be, like play, and like that's the stuff that they're up to. And I think to your point, being our authentic self does not mean we have the right to be an asshole to anyone or a jerk or whatever the language is that we use. And I do think it's sort of interesting. I mean, there is a tension in cultures around the world, not just in the United States, between leaders who are manifesting or demonstrating leadership that is what you're talking about. It's transformational leadership. It is the sort of leaders that people truly respect and truly want to work for. And then there's another sort of power dynamic going on also. And I mean, I don't want to dive into politics by any means, but I mean, how does a leader really orient themselves in a way that encourages creativity, encourages innovation, encourages that sense of connectedness to something bigger than ourselves?
I think it has to come back to an ego check and the questioning of what we've been told leaders are as the top-down dictatorial authoritarian kind of management style that existed for centuries. And maybe it's because we are coaches, the idea that collaborative communication is the key. And it's this recognition that gets us out of the ego awareness of, because I have a certain title, I'm supposed to know everything and you're going to do what I do. And the most dangerous phrase in any business is just do it the way I told you because we've always done it this way.
Yeah.
That doesn't bring anything new into the space, into the world, into the industry, into the company, or into our lives. When we finally accept that the wisdom of the room is a collective wisdom, and that we can start to pull in perspectives from others, ultimately a decision has to be made. Not everybody's going to agree with it. That's just part of it. But the fact that they will have a voice in the ultimate decision and their perspective is considered will help get the room more aligned to all moving together as a unit. And also might, even though that perspective doesn't get taken in at this moment, it puts a lens maybe on something downstream to be aware of, that if an obstacle or a challenge were to occur, I remember this from back here. We can now navigate around it. And back when I was going through my hypnotherapy training, I had one of these epiphany moments that might go into this. If we think about a Venn diagrams are focused inward of what's the common set that brings these things together. But I think weird things sometimes, like what would be a graphic of an image of collaboration? How would you sew that? And it hit me, it's a Venn diagram focused outward. What's the outer bounding circle of the collective wisdom, and how do we pull it all together? That's collaboration.
I may need you to draw me a picture of this and send it to me for the podcast notes.
I'll send you. I actually drew it and I gave it to my wife, and it's the logo of her business.
Yeah, do send it. I'd be very curious to see this because that sounds fascinating. And I think something that you just said too is this sort of the collective wisdom. It's not that we are going to we're all going to be in agreement. Like a decision has to be made. We're going to make it. We're going to be moving forward in a particular direction. But at least there's a sense of, I had an opportunity to share, like, these were the concerns that were coming up for me, or have we really thought about the consequences of this choice, or whatever that is. And that's really a lot of that, bringing in these diverse perspectives and really encouraging these diverse perspectives, so that even when the decision gets made, and it may not be made in the way that I think would be the best way for it to be made, it's at least taking into consideration a multitude of perspectives, which gives it the best shot of being successful. But the other thing, and I don't know if you've seen this in the work that you've done, I worked for the military for many years, and one of the people got sent to my office because they had gotten in trouble. And so one of the things that I consistently saw was when people felt disenfranchised in any way, and I don't care about anything, it could be anything that people felt disenfranchised about, they worked very slowly or not at all. Or they just said, sure. And then they went off and did whatever it was they were going to do anyway, and weren't part of that team that was working together in support of whatever the identified outcome was that they were working towards. And you think about it in a military system. I mean, if you've got a flight deckhand who is working against the goal of getting the airplane prepared correctly, we could have lives can be lost and billions of dollars and things like that. So, I mean, this disenfranchisement, I mean, just from a kind of I don't know, corporate or business level has a ROI.
Yeah. And it reminds me of two phrases I heard from back in those days when I was working for other people. The one was malicious compliance. I'll just do it because I have to, and I will show up at the lowest level of engagement as possible. And then the other one, someone was described as a benign saboteur. Wow. They would be nice to your face, but they would work behind your back and you wouldn't know it, and undermine the process and the progress that you were trying to make. Those are awesome terms. I need to bookmark those. But if someone isn't engaged, they're either going to work to subvert, or they're not going to show up at a way that's fully engaged to make the project happen.
I'm so glad you remembered those terms. I'm totally co-opting them myself.
I charge low franchise fees.
Yes, I can afford low.
Quick interruption. And I just want to say thank you so much for being on my channel, for liking and subscribing to the work that I'm doing. It means a great deal to me, and I'm very appreciative of it. I also want to extend an invitation to my monthly Q&As so that you have an opportunity. If you're a coach, it's my treat. Sign up below or follow the link, and you can come each month and have an opportunity to get a resource development CCE, as well as participate in a really rich conversation about how we show up as coaches and what we would like to be playing with in our own work, basically. So you are invited, and thank you for being here.
Oh, goodness. And then, in your book, there's a couple different things. First, actually, you have an article that you wrote called I believe the article was The Art of Driving in Fog, or that was a theory that was in the article about the science of transformation and hypnotherapy. So I would love to hear more about your hypnotherapy and how this has impacted and shaped who you are and how you show up. I don't know enough about hypnotherapy also, so let me just start with that.
Okay. So it's, again, strangely, going back to who was I when I was 4 or 5 and younger, I always had this love of the mind and what was possible. And just thinking about it, maybe one of my brothers was reading a book on hypnosis when I was in my late single digits to early teenage years. I'm not sure, but I just remember the concept being around. And I have always had a fascination with the power of the mind to reshape. And when I keep saying weird like it's a judgment.
We're good. I'm weird. You're weird. We're weird. Let's just be weird together.
When I was going through my existential crisis about, at this point, 15-ish years ago, in about 2012 to 2013, working in that job that was a miserable soul-sucking experience, just literally working myself to death and feeling it, being in a marriage that was falling apart and was not at that point in time ready to call it, came to the point of working with a counselor and said, you got to. And as I'm navigating the new normal during the separation, before the divorce is final, and just not feeling my mojo, I'm really low energy at that point, or I was. Don't say the I am. I was really low energy at that point. I was introduced to a hypnotherapist in Kansas City. I need to meet that person now. We did some sessions together to help me find my mojo, get my confidence back, all of it, and that could be why it was top of mind when I eventually walked away from the business I was in to go do something else. And was then dating who is now my current wife. We moved from Kansas City down to Naples, Florida, coming into tune with the universal alignment. We're moving to Naples, which is a really relatively small town overall in Florida. It's like the retirement community of the 1%. Had curiosity about just reinventing myself. Hypnotherapy comes forward again, something I was interested in my youth. Now it's back again. And we talked about it on the road moving down. I said, no, check it out, see what's out there. At the time, when I did that web search that night from Nashville, there was one school in Florida teaching a state-certified 500-hour program with campuses in all the major towns: Tampa, Orlando, Miami, and Naples. And it was like, shut up and take my money. I know what I'm supposed to do now. This is perfectly aligned. And going through that program was 9 months of really understanding the concept of how these internal drivers and beliefs that so many of them, particularly the imposter that comes forward consciously, is driven back here as things that we've learned either in moments of shock of like, I'm never doing that again. This is
right.
And a part learns how to keep us safe. Yeah. Or through repetition of hearing the same thing over and over, which is where my old money myth got locked in from having two parents whose formative years were in the Depression, and there was always lack in their life, even in the 70s. And understanding now how to quiet the conscious mind to then access what's going on back here in the client. When we're in that state, you're fully aware. It's not like the nonsense of TV shows and stage shows of like, you don't remember anything. It wouldn't be hypnotherapy if you didn't remember it. That's stupid.
Sorry, hold on a second. It wouldn't be hypnotherapy. It would just be a stage show if it was the other. Yeah. Yes. Thank you for that. I love the distinction, though. I think that's good. Thank you.
Yeah. It is someone doing it for entertainment because their purpose is different than someone doing it for healing and evolvement. And I have to be careful in certain states with saying the word healing. So there's that whole thing. But are we doing it to help the person achieve and expand and evolve? I'm there for them. I'm not there to have them dance like a chicken and all that other nonsense. Mm-hmm. So as we understand those drivers and help to shake them loose, understand where they were formed and maybe how they were formed and why, and they're all protective devices. Anybody who's ever done Gestalt work, our parts are always trying to help us. They're never trying to harm us. And it feels like when we're pushing against that thing, if we haven't achieved yet, it feels like something's holding us back to prevent us, but it's not that. It's keeping us safe with what it knows.
Right.
It learned its job when we were 7, 8, 10 years old, and said, I got my job for the rest of so-and-so's life. Mm-hmm. But when we're then 25, 35, 45, 55, that mindset from 7 doesn't work because we're now adults and we have more free will. So when I do parts work with a client in hypnotherapy, we talk to that part. Mm-hmm. What's its purpose? How's it help? And the client can then say to it, like, the way you're doing your job isn't helping. I need you to realign your energy and do this instead. And we're going to give you a job promotion.
Yeah.
Let's do that. I'm on. And then their internal energy alignment shifts to now their parts, rather than trying to protect and keep safe and play small, open up to the world more. And strangely enough, then the after effect of that is more confidence, because confidence is an outcome. It's not a prerequisite. And they start achieving and actualizing based on the new script back here versus the old one that says you're not allowed to, you're not worthy of. And if I could boil all this work down to just one or two sentences of what's at the core of all of it, the person who thinks they are not good enough and they are unworthy.
Yeah.
That's the core.
Yeah. And in my background with parts work, I came at it through EMDR and working with trauma, and everything that you're saying, I really resonate with, because, we have to learn how to survive in these families that we find ourselves, and we're little, and, it's not 200 years ago where at 7, I can decide to just leave home and go. I guess I could, but come on. And most of us, unless it's so horrible, are going to stick it out because it's easier to live with these people than it is to run away and try and make it on your own at 7. But I've often said to people, the same work that you're talking about. So I really want to reinforce this is like, what was the service that this did for you? And I think I was in a a little bit of trauma-informed coaching training yesterday, and they were talking about the need for integration. And part of that is that so often people want to other these parts of ourselves that no longer work. And the more we're like resistant to it, I see you nodding your head, so I'm going to want to hear your thoughts on this, but the more that we resist it, the more that it becomes an unconscious just navigator of our life in so many ways. And it is only through the exploration, to your point, of like, what was the value that this part brought? Like, how did it keep you safe? And I've often said, well, if it was to have a different job, what would the job be? Because it's not like it's going to go away. It's you. Right? And so like, how do we give it something new to do that is more useful and effective? Because what worked when you were 7 is not working when you're 27 or 37 or 47 or 57, but we're still operating, to your point, on those same old narratives.
Yeah. And one of the required readings for my hypnotherapy training was The Dark Side of the Light Chasers by Debbie Ford. And it's the same idea. Hers is, she was focused mainly on shadow work. And it's been 10, 12 years since I read it. And if I remember her story correctly, she had a period of substance addiction that she had worked through, got into pursuing self-development, self-help, and winds up on a stage in a seminar somewhere. And the facilitator is talking to her, and she is railing on about her mother, using a certain word about her mother that starts with a B, that she is a B. And the facilitator looks back at Debbie and says, "Debbie, you're being a B." And she has this reaction, like her face was just slapped, and starts railing against that. And then suddenly has the awareness of, oh, I'm acting exactly like my mother. And that put her on a path of exploring the shadow, which this incredibly powerful part of us that we tend to other. Mm-hmm. And she came to the realization that this incredibly powerful part of me, I'm disavowing because it reminds me of someone I don't like and had a negative relationship with. And until I embrace it and embrace its power, I'm not experiencing myself as a whole human being. Mm-hmm. And then she created an entire institute around helping people facilitate shadow work. I think she passed in the early 2010s, but I believe the Institute is still around. It's an amazing story and amazing work of, and the word you used there, resist. What we resist persists. The shadow is going to keep tapping on your shoulder and say, hey, pay attention to me, because it's a powerful creative force. Freud thought it was, because it was primal, Freud negated it because he was Mr. Think with your head. And at the same time, Jung looked at it and said, well, it's primal, but it's neutral. It can be used as a creative force or a destructive force, depending on how you align it. Right. And he embraced it more as use it and bring it forward with, you can be creative with it. Yeah. And I found that was a big part for me too, because I having observed anger when I was growing up, I would tend to go toward anger and quick flash. And eventually navigating through that through a lot of help of therapists and counselors. Thank you all. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing if it wasn't for them. have integrated it now where it flows, and when it has to be there, because I used to just push it away. I'm like, oh, that's not appropriate. I can't be that. And I became a doormat.
Yeah.
But now integrating it back in, I can hold boundaries more firmly and say, oh, we are not going past there. Sorry. Yeah. No, actually not sorry. We are not going past there.
Yeah, really using it as an indicator of where boundaries are getting crossed and where I mean, I'm a huge believer in emotions tell us stuff, and it's just another sensory system that allows us to be curious. Like anytime I find myself getting really angry, and look, I'm a redheaded Irish Leo. I taught anger management for 7 years for the military, starting with I'm a redheaded Irish Leo. There's probably no amount of pissed off you've ever had that I have probably not also at least dreamed about. And I think to your point, like, but I didn't like who I was being as an angry person. And there was such a sense of helplessness that was triggering the anger. So like my response to helplessness was anger. And as a result of it, then I created dramas around myself, which has sort of magnified things. And doing the work, and I mean, teaching anger management for 7 years, if you ever have the opportunity to do something like that, is like so great, especially if you do it with the sense of I am and let people like learn by like teaching you. It is such a powerful thing, but it really shifted my relationship with emotions and with anger in particular, because then it just became a way of exploring my response to the world versus that my anger was justified, righteous, right, wrong, and different. It was there. What was it about? What was it trying to teach me? And then I could then make a choice. I could have some freedom of choice. Just like everything that you're saying. I just agree with everything that you're saying. Yeah. Talk more about practical manifesting. Well, actually, before that, this question came up as you were talking. You're talking about parts work and you're talking about these sorts of things. And one of the things and this is maybe my own story, so I'm just going to share it and you tell me what you think. And you're a coach and I'm a coach, and I'm always a little concerned when coaches want to do parts work and want to explore the shadow of a person's self. And yet I think that those parts come up. So how do you handle navigating this deeper work, but still holding the space of coaching and not therapy?
The first line of it is I keep the very strict ICF definition of therapy, which is exploring the emotional past. We are not going back to when you were 9 years old and you didn't get a pony and you're upset about it for your birthday. We're not going back there. Keep it here in the present. So someone says, part of me wants, the classic description of part of me wants to do this and part of me, okay, which part do you want to talk to first? Mm-hmm. We could do it as an NLP practice of imagine the two parts in your hand and having a conversation, keeping it here in the present. As long as they're not using DSM-5 words like depression or anxiety, we're not going there either. So I keep that on it. If we're having a conversation about perceptions of fractures, that's a judgmental word. Perceptions of separations or perceptions of distinctions of self. For me, we're in the space of coaching as long as we are staying right here in the moment. And so much of that for me is being right here with what's in front of me and not worrying about where is this conversation going or wondering be stuck on what happened before. It's right here with what I am sensing on all levels with the individual who is in front of me at that moment.
Yeah. That's because I think that's important as a distinction, because I often have coaching participants in my programs go, well, but the path, I mean, like we need they mention anxiety, and so the coach is like, tell me more about your anxiety. And I always, kind of my feeling on it is, one, I'm not even sure that's good therapy to just go, tell me more about your anxiety. But I think this is where agreement setting and having overarching goals is really important too. Like, what about that anxiety needs to be explored so that you can move forward, not so that we can go traipsing around in the dark closet with all the old baggage that you probably maybe need a therapist or a hypnotherapist or somebody who is really trained to do that part work. Can support you in doing that. And I think this is also, and I don't know what your thinking on this is, but I think this is also where we have other people that we work with, so that it isn't like I must be the only coach, that I can be the only coach in their life, and therefore I must do all of this, but rather, what are the other resources that I have as a coach? I see you nodding your head. And so what's showing up for you with that?
On the most immediate thing, that goes back to the idea of collaboration we talked to a little while ago. What's the collective wisdom of my network? Same thing versus the collective wisdom of the room. And then let me get the thought back. It'll boomerang here in a second. The idea of not going in on the anxiety, because that would be the space of therapy. What's on the other side of it? Mm-hmm. Who are they? Who will they be, or who can they be on the other side of the anxiety, and exploring that outcome? Maybe they do need to work with someone in the space of exploring the anxiety, which is for the licensed fields, but we can work around it to help. Maybe they don't need to go into it. Maybe they've been avoiding it for a reason. And it's not because they're necessarily consciously. It's because their subconscious mind will not bring up anything they're not ready to process. It's a protective device.
Yeah.
And just because it allows it to come up does not mean it's going to be unicorns and rainbows and singing kumbaya when it gets processed. There could be a whole lot of tears, a whole lot of frustration, but that's what has to be released and experienced to get to the other side of it. I remember when I was teaching, students would constantly, and this would be like, basic level, introductory, foundational teaching, would get so freaked out if a client started to cry. Oh, they need therapy. No, they don't. They need someone to hold the space for them. Because if you are going to relegate emotions to the fields of therapy, that means every family member and every best friend ever in the history of the world is guilty of practicing without a license. Get over yourself. Hold the space for them and be another human being, being there for them in their time of need. Hold the silence, don't say a damn word, and hold it with empathy. And you'll find they will find their way through it. Just get a little fired up on something.
Yeah. Mic drop.
We're done here. I'll see you.
Our work here today is done. That is really important. And it reminds me too, I've been sitting and playing with this concept also. Silence is a question. And that be quiet. If you don't know what to say, don't say anything. Mm-hmm. Right? It's okay. It's okay not to say anything. It's okay just to be a witness and honor the experience somebody is going through. Beautiful. I would love
It reminds me of when I was in art school and had a communication class as part of it. The communication instructor one day said, how did he put it? That silence is actually the most purest form of communication because nothing needs to be said.
Yeah. I want to segue. I'm going to break the silence. And I want to segue into practical manifesting and the follow-up of the pessimist guide to manifesting. What was your talk to me? I'm like, I don't know why I'm fumbling with a question that is really very easy. Tell me more about these books.
So going back to that hypnotherapy training, when we got to hours 400 to 500, which was what I label as the spooky woo-woo training, the past life regression, if someone is in state and they're saying they were abducted by aliens, or they feel they might have an entity attachment. Those are the spaces I love playing in with hypnotherapy. It comes up in my practice more often than not. But we started talking about the 21 universal laws of manifesting. Say, what? There's 20 more than the one I know about from that book over there. Like, this is interesting. And I realized that I'll just say it, everybody knows the book. While the secret was,
come on.
Yeah, while it was there in its day, it focused on one. And there's all these other energies that come into play that enhance it. And I think the other disservice that book did was it put out the idea, if you just wish for it, it'll work. Mm-hmm. And there was very little about actually taking action with the new belief structure, which is what we help people do in coaching. We expand their awareness so that they can then enter into the doing differently. Like, I want to do a book that's very practical, that's not so woo-woo. And I kind of had an image of it, like an energetic scale of belief from 0 to 10, of where 0, these people are so grounded, they're like rocks. And 10, these people are so spiritual, they're ready to fly off the planet. My realm's going to be those who are about a 3.5 and above. Like, they're just curious enough that we can pull them over to the spiritual side because there's a little bit of curiosity there and they're not quite dead center. So the first book, Practical Manifesting, was really more in alignment with the idea of life mastery. It's the same stuff, just spoken to in a more practical way, more grounded terminology. That was the first one. And then about 1.5 years, 2 years later, I got a calling, like an intuitional download, to do a deep dive on each of the 21 individual laws. And that's A Pessimist's Guide to Manifesting. And what the idea there is, how many people read The Secret and said, oh, I wished for something, I didn't get it, this is a bunch of BS. And automatically now you come into a resistance alignment, the pessimist of it doesn't work. And in exploring each of the individual energies of the 21, how do we tend to view them as not working or come in with disbelief that creates the outcome? Because the laws are neutral. It's our energy that we bring to them. And then how do we shift that perspective, recognizing that they're not individual laws, they all intertwine, to come in with practical exercises to shift our awareness and begin creating the outcomes that we intend to achieve.
Yeah, and I think that you write about that also in your article around the universal laws of vibration, how you keep attracting the same problems. I'm a big believer in energetic signatures and this idea that we attract. And to your point, The Secret was, and we can just say it, honestly, everybody knows what the book is, and if they don't, then they can look it up. But I mean,
we can save them the trouble of reading it.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it was so focused on, if I visualize a parking spot, it magically shows up, or if I visualize a diamond ring, it magically shows up. And it was missing, I think, so much of the part of, like, what do you want to manifest your life into? Like, forget about the parking spot. The parking spot's just like, whatever. The ring is whatever. You may or may not even want the ring if you're manifesting a life that you feel richness in, right? You don't need the ring in order to look rich. You have a rich life. And so I'm really have experienced this continuously over and over and over again in my own life, is and it goes back even to the anger management. If I'm going to be in alignment with the signature energy of anger, it's going to take me in a direction. My focus is going to be in a direction. I'm going to be attuned to everything that makes me mad. And I'm also going to align with other people who are super angry. And so I'm going to find that I have created a whole world of anger around me as a result of it. So could you talk a little bit about this idea that our thoughts and our emotions have, like, energetic or vibratory sort of signatures, for lack of another way of saying it?
Yeah, we can talk about it both grounded and spiritual. So on a grounded level, reticular activating system, the attention focusing device in our brains that tells us what's important, has kept us alive as a species for millions of years. It's the physical side of you get more what you focus on. Program it to look for obstacles because that negativity bias is there. You're going to see obstacles all around you. And that's where I was back in 2012, 2013 in that miserable soul-sucking job. I could not see an opportunity in front of me to get out and find my way ahead, but I could tell you everything that was in my way. If we start looking to the opportunity, and 5-Minute Journal is great for this. That's the book that started my pivot of look for something else. And it's the idea of the old 3D glasses, one red lens, one blue. If you have both eyes open and look at that printed page, it pops. But if you close either eye, it goes flat. And one side could be I'm only looking for challenges so I don't perceive opportunity. The other side, it sounds like, if I open the eye to have opportunity, that's great. Well, maybe not. Now you could be in toxic positivity, not seeing potential pitfalls. It only really becomes 3-dimensional when we go in eyes fully open. In the energetic side, the concept that gets talked about so much, and I've talked to clients about it, I've said it elsewhere, what you are looking for is looking for you. And it's coming into this vibrational frequency, just like a radio station tuning the dial on your receiver in your car to get the thing. You've got to shift how you are being. And that begins with belief structure. It also comes into slowing way down and tuning into our intuition. And when we notice we're not in that lower vibration stress, which is a really low vibration, stress and tension, we start breathing and coming into the present moment. Some of that will dissipate because stress comes from carrying what was and letting it live rent-free in our head, or worrying about what will be that hasn't been created yet. But truly, if we come right here to this moment, right here, everything's fine. Doesn't matter what your bank account says, doesn't matter what your relationship is, you're alive and present right here. That means there's opportunity. And if we go really spooky with it, maybe not really spooky, the idea that our conscious mind perceives time in a linear way, but it's all happening around us at all times. How do we have to shift our perception to then notice the opportunities and the abundance that's around us to come into harmony with it? So much of my work in the past year has been exploring this bifurcation of the learned self and the true self. And a lot of my personal belief is in transpersonal philosophy, that we are the universe, God, source, experiencing incarnation. And when we come to that as a state of idea and a full-on state of belief, if we are that means anything is possible. And one of the universal laws is the law of pure potentiality. Anything can exist. Might not have the technology to make it happen yet, but it can exist. When we get out of our way of who we've learned to be and following the rules of what has been so far, we can come into new creation and make something different, which is all any of it is have an idea of something that hasn't been done yet and make it happen. Okay, great. But we forget how actually powerful we are because we tell ourselves these stories that other people have told us that we're not good enough. And then we reinforce it with going out and stumbling, and rather than seeing it as a learning experience, we see it as we're screwed up or we're wrong or we're not good enough. Fail. Oh, the big F. Yep, I'm an F. That.
And that is a fundamental mindset shift that people, if you want to be happy or successful, whatever happy is for you, like for me, happy is just, to your point, being present in the moment and grateful and in a space of gratitude and appreciating the beauty around me. And the mindset has to shift if we're to be able to access that. And if we see everything that we've done that we've failed, we miss such a brilliant opportunity to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead. You go ahead.
Going back to the idea of I want to manifest the diamond ring and then I'll be happy. Like all those things, if we put the marker in something outside of us that's outside of our control, that's influencing our internal state, and we're putting our internal state of happiness, joy, bliss dependent on something out of our control. And I remember, so first off, going to the way you had mentioned it, of the ring creates the joy and the bliss. And I would ask, which it's a chicken and egg moment.
Yeah.
With a true answer, though, does the ring create the happiness or does the happiness create the ring?
Dean. And
I had that conversation with a client who was in a low energy space, very frustrated because dating wasn't working out. And like we talked about doing would you be open to asking permission, because the client has autonomy, doing a visualization of tell me about you when you're with the ideal person. Energy pops, like, oh, this is what's going on. Okay, tell me about you there. You told me about them. Tell me about you. Oh, yeah. Okay, got it all? Yep. Okay, come on back. Now, so that person in that visualization, which version of you are they looking for? The one there or the one who's sitting in front of me tonight? I'm wanting them to fix me. I don't want someone to fix me. This is my work. Yep. Off to the races.
And it's so true. How we meet the moment, how we meet people, it impacts so greatly how they perceive us, and if we go in thinking nobody's ever really going to love me, nobody's loved me yet, there's nobody trustworthy out there, we will fill our lives again to that energetic signature of there's nobody. I mean, and there are a lot of untrustworthy people out there. I'll give you that. But you're attracting them to you, which is your point. Why do you keep attracting the same problem? I used to tell people, I did marriage counseling for so many years. And I used to say, and along the way was a lot of dating counseling, because people would get divorced, and I'd say, honestly, I cannot prove reincarnation, nor do I wish to, but I can prove that you will reincarnate the past issues into the present relationship until you deal with them, and they will and it will look like a new person that you have found, and they are new and special and different, and they are, oh my God, this is my soulmate. And then yourselves will show up and you will be dealing with the same exact issues all over again with this new person, creating the same almost identical issues that you have to work on. And it kind of is funny because and I don't know, I think it was Gottman in his research, he was talking about divorce rates and things like that. And I know we're kind of off field here, but he talked about, first marriages, there's about 50% of them, let's just say, end in divorce. And you would think that the number would go down for second marriages because, we've learned something, but actually the divorce rate is higher for second marriages. And then you would think it would really go down for third marriages. And actually, it doesn't go down because we're continually bringing ourselves into the relationship, and whatever we haven't worked on manifests. And I think that fits with what you're talking about.
And to me, two things play into that. There's the what did we not learn? So there's a bit of intentionality, and I talk about this with individuals who go through job searches. They're in that miserable soul-sucking job, and the intention is just get me the hell out of here.
Right.
And they go, and then there's that 9 month to 12-month honeymoon period of, oh, this is a great job. I'm glad I got out of the old place.
Fire feels warm.
And then it starts, all the same stuff starts happening. The intention was met. The intention was get me out of place A. Okay. And when it's about what do you want to create coming into manifesting, rather than just jumping, what do you want as the next role? What's your bigger picture here? So that now when opportunities come along, it's not just get me out of the frying pan, I hope I don't wind up in the fire. It's about creating and vetting opportunities. And then one of the things that bugs me to no end and has for decades around the idea of soulmates and twin flames is that they're supposed to be these happy, harmonious things because we're connected at the soul level. Your soul has a lot of work to do. And it's not always unicorns, rainbows, and kumbaya. It's about what has to be learned and released, and you are going to repeat the lesson until you learn it.
Yeah.
So yes, they are a soulmate, but they're not there for the reason you think they are when you put that label on
Well,
it.
and it's so funny. I don't remember who said it. I want to say it was Carl Jung, but it could have been somebody else. Anytime you have more than one person in a relationship, it's dysfunctional. And so I remember in I've been married. Michael and I will be celebrating 27 years this year.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. And I remember this was probably about, 12 years ago, something like that. I said to him, "Am I annoying?" And he goes, "Oh God, yes, you're so annoying." I was like, "But you're annoying too." He's like, "Absolutely. I am a monster. I'm like so annoying." And it is the recognition that we're both annoying. And so how do we navigate the annoyances? And I think it's like, I don't know that I need a soulmate. I need a partner to play and read my label and to be truthful and honest, but also have compassion and love for the journey, but also be doing their own work. And so I love what you're talking about here. You've got work to do. Even if this is your energetic partner in this experience, they're the right person. They're probably the right person because you're going to learn a lot, not because it's going to be all unicorns and hearts and sparkles. So, we've been talking for a bit here, and I really want to ask, like, what do you think is maybe essential for coaches to take away from this conversation? Or therapists, or hypnotherapists for that matter, or executives, like all of them. What do people need to take away from this conversation?
The other person in the room is the expert. They're the one living their life. They know more about it than you do, whether you are sitting as a coach, whether you are sitting as a therapist looking to diagnose what they're going through. And I put some stress on that maybe I didn't necessarily mean to. There's a place and time for all of it. View the whole person in front of you rather than trying to put a lens of experience on how they're presenting in the moment, because how they're presenting in the moment is the person who's experiencing the challenge. I think our job in any of the giving fields, the giving professions, coaching, counseling, therapy, all of it, is not about solving their problems. It's about helping them solve themselves. Einstein had that quote, and I've been referencing it a lot lately, of the same level of thinking that created the problem will not solve it. When we bring that to the individuals we are in service to, the same level of awareness that is creating the problem will not solve it. Mm-hmm. And it's our job to awaken the individual to the true power within them that they've forgotten that's there, because we're that's infinitely powerful. We have resources that we have forgotten or never looked to. And our job as coaches or therapists, counselors, is to reawaken the individual to their possibility and their true power so that they can go out and live that life. My job is to be obsolete in my client's life. They shouldn't need me forever.
Yeah. I often say I'm a short-term solution to your long-term life. Mm-hmm. You mentioned several books in our conversation today. Is there anything else that you would maybe emphasize or recommend as a resource for people listening to this podcast that might be useful for their own learning?
The one that first came to mind when we were talking about learning to be miserable was Solve for Happy by Mo Gaudat, who is the chief business officer for Google. I think he's still there. He wrote the book in about 2017. He created an organization called 1 Billion Happy, and his purpose to bring joy and happiness to the world. He has a great metaphor in there of how, and his idea is that we are born in a default state of happiness, mm-hmm. and we learn to be miserable. So, and if we go to the work of Martin Seligman with Learned Optimism, anything you learn, you can unlearn. So that becomes key in all of the work too. If we learn to be, who can we learn to be differently?
Yeah, and then neuroplasticity, right? We have that. It's a thing.
And then the book that changed my life is Black Hole Focus by Isaiah Hankel. Read it back in 2013 or so. as I was going through that stressful point of really, this is not working for me anymore. And it came into my awareness, read the book, and started applying the principles. At the time, he had been doing seminars around the country. I got to go to a few of them and also be a roundtable host at two of them. It really opened up my perspective on how to shift my being and start living differently. So that it was core to me coming into these fields.
And our final question for our episode today comes from a prior guest who asked this question: how will you go out and be great today?
I will boldly own my spookiness, because I've been hiding it again, and it's time. It's been tapping me. It's time to put it out there, because it's the thing that I see missing in so much leadership space, is this return to intuition, the return to the thing that's nudging us forward. It's like a loss of spirit.
Yeah.
And harmony. And it's time for me to be out there as the person who promotes that and calls it to awareness. So I shall boldly declare.
Boldly declared. Daniel, thank you so much for being in the studio today and for this conversation. I sincerely appreciate it, and I have absolutely adored getting to know you better over this last month. And so I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you. I've loved this. This is a great conversation. Thank you for the opportunity.